and welcome to my video. Today I'm going to go through all the books I've read in November. This month I read 12 books, which is a lot, a lot for me. I don't normally read that much in a month. I don't know what was going on. I just powered through. Maybe it was the second UK lockdown and I just needed an escape. I'm going to try and go through the books chronologically. There's some books that I can't actually find, but I'll get to those anyway. So the first book I read was The Black Unicorn by Audre Lorde, which is a poetry collection. I actually did a review of this book and another poetry book that I'm going to mention. Actually, I'll mention it now. Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. So I did a review of both these poetry books, both these poetry collections, in another video which I'll link somewhere. These both for me were 4 stars. They were both great. So this one is written by Audre Lorde. A lot of very raw, powerful poems about her experiences as a black woman, as a black lesbian, a lot of poems about her relationships, and some that pay tribute to lives lost due to police brutality and crime and things. And yeah, it was a really great collection. And as for the other book that I reviewed in that video, Don't Call Us Dead, this is an extremely powerful book as well. A lot of poems to do with the lives lost due to police brutality, the lives of black men particularly, some really raw interpretations of their relationships with men and the HIV diagnosis. And yeah, it's just incredibly powerful, really emotive collection. I love them both, to be honest. Next I read The Shadows by Alex North. I listened to that as an audiobook, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I read in the previous month Whisper Man by Alex North, so I was actually really looking forward to The Shadows, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as Whisper Man. I like the concept. So The Shadows, it follows like 2 different sort of narratives, past and present, following the same characters, revolving around the main character, and like events that happened in his childhood, because murders are happening and these murders are linked to lucid dreaming. And it's an interesting story. I don't want to give any spoilers away. And it's interesting, the concept's interesting, because anything that involves sort of creepy kids, you know, it's going to be good. But it just, I don't know, I wasn't really connected to the characters as much. I gave it 3 stars because I liked the concept and I did want to know what was happening, but I couldn't really give it more than that because it just didn't engage me as much as Whisper Man, his other novel, did. Next I read The Girl with All the Gifts. I've also mentioned this book in a different video, when my Power 3 video, when I talk about a book, a game and a film of all of the similar theme. But this book is a zombie apocalypse story focusing on 5 main central characters, but mainly about the little girl Melanie, who is a hungry, which is their version of zombie, but is special in that she hasn't lost her sentience, I guess, her consciousness. She can still learn and grow. She can control her hunger, and we follow them as they're all trying to survive. And I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I nearly gave it 3 stars and nearly didn't give it 4 stars because as interesting as the plot is, and interesting as the kind of zombies they are, like fungal zombies, where it's like a fungus that's attacking the brain rather than like, you know, like a spill in a lab or something. As interesting as that is, I wasn't really connected as much as I wanted to be. But what saved it for me was the ending. The ending is so bleak. Not spoilers, but so bleak. And I really liked it. I liked that it was bleak and it was just messed up. And that really saved it for me, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. And another reason why I was like, about it, is that I don't think Mark Carey wrote the female characters particularly well. So there's 2 female, apart from Melanie the child, there's 2 female characters, like adult female, Miss Justineau and Dr. Cadwell, Caroline Cadwell or something. But Miss Justineau is like the character, like almost like the main protagonist that you're supposed to like. What bothered me was that, I mean, she wasn't written poorly compared to like some authors. There's definitely other authors out there that write females really badly. But what bothered me more was about, how to explain? What bothers me is that I feel like a lot of authors struggle to write female like sexuality well, and it feels like often female sexuality is only like present when it's in relation to it being like to another person, to, like gratified by, like, for example, in this novel, the only time Mistress Sunno's sexuality, like desire, needs, mentioned is when she's, you know, deciding to have sex with a man. But whereas the male characters in this, their sort of desires and sexuality is something that is sort of mentioned on and off throughout, like a normal person, like who has needs and desires, and it's not always about about a woman or about another it's not about gratifying needs of another person, it's about their own needs. But with a woman it's not the same, and like, you know, male masturbation is mentioned but female masturbation isn't, and that bothers me. Like, women have a sexuality that is separate to men. You know, so it almost took off a star, but the ending, that's what saved it for me. It's an interesting read. If you like zombie apocalypse, it's a good one, but with the focus more on relationships more than the zombies. It's a good one. Next book I read was a non-fiction book. It is The Body Remembers, the psychophysiology of trauma and trauma treatment. So this is a book that I read mainly for my own work as a therapist, as a counsellor. But it's something that I'd wanted to read anyway. I'd like referenced it and read odd chapters for like various essays and stuff in my training. But I wanted to read this anyway, just to help with some work I was doing at the time. And it's really good. It's really good. It is basically about how trauma can be a whole spectrum of stuff. How trauma is stored in our body, how our body reacts, you know, fight, flight, freeze, but it looks more about the impact psychologically of that, and it talks about what happens in the brain, but also what happens and how that links emotionally, what happens emotionally, and it was really interesting, and it is like 20 years old, so some of the language in it I wasn't the best, and it talks about like PTSD a lot, but what it's trying to say is like the experience of trauma, or the lasting experience of trauma, you know, the thing that you go to therapy for because it's ongoing, but it used like what would be a diagnosis to sort of say that some of the language wasn't up to date as I would hope. It's still like really useful because I think the way it's written as well is like everything's broken down so clearly, so even if you're not part of like the psychotherapy world, I feel like you could get something out of this, even just understanding how you process like stressful events or process trauma, if you're okay with that word. So the first half is sort of talking through like what happens to the body, what happens to our memory, what happens to us emotionally, psychologically, and then the second half is like the treatment side, so ways maybe to work with it in therapy. So that's more useful for like a therapist and how they would may approach working sensitively and safely with their clients. And I really enjoy this, I really appreciate this book because I feel like mental health and physical health and physical physiology are always taken separately, especially at least in our medical model here in the UK. Like NHS is they're separately, but actually like it's all one system, isn't it? So a book that focuses on how they play a part together and how they interact, it was really interesting. So even if, you know, you think you're not interested in getting therapy, or maybe you're not a therapist, there might be something for you in this book. Yeah, it's a weird one to bring here, but it was a good read and interesting and useful, really useful. And I gave it 4 stars. It would be 5 stars if it was more up to date, but things age and get out of date very quickly. But still a useful read. So next I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. This was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It's a thriller. And what happens in this book is you follow the main character, whose name I've forgotten. I can't remember anyone's names. And she is driving down across America to Utah, maybe, to see her mum in hospital because her mum's got cancer, having an operation in the hospital. And she's driving, there's a huge snowstorm. She's driving from university to this place. There's a huge snowstorm and she has to pull into a rest stop because it's just getting too much to drive. Like a windscreen wiper is broken. It's like, I guess it's the kind of snow we don't get here where it's like super deep. And she has to pull into a rest stop, which is something we also don't really have here. but it's like I guess kind of like a service station. There's like a place for her a shelter to rest and get drinks, I guess, somewhere to pull over when you're tired driving. And she gets there and she realises that a little girl's been kidnapped. And there's a few other people at this rest stop. They're all kind of snowed in there. There's trapped there. They're waiting for the plows. Plows aren't coming till morning. And so this is about her trying to figure out who are the kidnappers and how can she help this little girl without risking their lives, because they can't really go anywhere. They have no signal. The phone's out. And it's all about figuring that out. And it was real good. It was really good, interesting, a bit of a wild ride. I gave it 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. It's thrilling. My phone died, so the lighting may be different now that it's got some charge in it. But next, I read My Sister the Serial Killer. This was an entertaining read. It was like darkly comic, but still like entertaining. Yeah, it was an entertaining read. I gave it 3 out of 5. Basically, this story follows our protagonist and her sister, and her sister is a serial killer. And every time my sister gets into a relationship, she ends up killing her partner, and then our protagonist, our main character, has to go and clean up the mess, basically, and help get rid of the body so that her sister can get away with it. And she's called Korede, is the main character, and Ayoola. So they're set in Nigeria. The main character's a Nigerian, and it's interesting, it's entertaining, and this plot starts like as Korede is in the middle of cleaning up one of her sister's messes, but it follows as Ayoola, her sister, starts to date Korede's love interest, like the person Korede is has a crush on, is interested in, who she works with, starts to date her sister, and everyone seems to be like infatuated with her sister because her sister's like pretty and she's got lighter skin and blah 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 blah, and Korede's often overlooked as maybe like the more plain sister, the less attractive one or whatever. And it's just interesting seeing their dynamic. There's like glimpses of their past and how they've got to where they are, because they have this unhealthy codependence on one another. Even though we're following Korede and her like dismay at her sister's behaviour and stuff, she is still like an enabler. She's like, they just have this like unhealthy codependence, a lot to do with trauma or whatever. And it's interesting. The reason why I only gave it 3 stars, which isn't necessarily a bad rating for me at least, but it's just not the best, is that I felt it was lacking. I felt like I wanted more. I wanted more, I don't know, depth to the characters. It feels like Ayoola has a lot of depth, but other characters don't have so much. Even our main character, I just wanted more. I wanted, a bit more character depth. Something felt like it was missing. I still enjoyed it. It's still a fun sort of, I don't know, it's not even thriller. It's just a fun novel that's darkly comic and a little bit messed up and has some suspense in some ways in it. And it was fun, and it was a quick read, and it's just a little bit of fun. Next, I read Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. Pretty Girls is an excellent book. It was my first 5-star read of the month, and it was so good. It's a haunting thriller that all evolves around our two main characters who are sisters. And when they're kids, their older sister goes missing and she's never found, and it's like about the impact it's had on them as adults now. We see how they are now as a result of this huge catastrophe within their family and how it's affected their family dynamic. And now girls going missing again, so they end up starting to investigate it basically, and they find like it's really, really good. It's haunting. There's a huge trigger warning for this book, because it does have a lot of sexual violence and quite graphically written about, so definitely trigger warning, but it's just so good. The characters are fully fleshed out, and it's just, I just desperately wanted to know what's happening. I was so intrigued. It's horrendous. The dynamic between the sisters is great. It was a really, really, really good read. Really so good. I really enjoyed it. I was just hooked in. And it's definitely the best sort of thriller I've read this year, for sure. Next, I read Queenie. I also did a book review recently, this week I think, on Queenie. So if you want to find out more about this book, please check that out. What I did and didn't like about it. I gave Queenie 4 stars. I love this book. It was really good. I had some issues with it, but basically we just follow Queenie. She's a black British woman in her mid-20s. We follow her following a relationship breakdown, and she just self-destructs basically, and we just follow the aftermath of that. And it's really, really interesting and entertaining. I thought Queenie was really annoying, but it's a good book. I really enjoyed it. It's a nice contemporary novel. It's something that was around on BookTube quite a lot recently and last year when it came out, but it's so good. I enjoyed it. Next I read, I can't find this book. I don't know where I've put it, but it's You Should Have Left by Daniel Kelman. I think I keep forgetting to say the authors of these books, but I'll write them in the description anyway. You Should Have Left by Daniel Kelman. This was disappointing. I was hoping it'd be good because there's a film based off it, which I think I've mentioned previously in my end of the year TBR video, but yeah, it's just disappointing. It's incredibly short, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You can still do some good work in a few words. But it's just, let me just tell you what it's about. So you follow this man. It's basically written like his diary, like his journal. He's a screenplay writer, so he's also trying to like write plans and notes, drafts for a screenplay. So they're like littered throughout his like thoughts. And he goes away with his wife and child, and things start to like go weird in this house, and it's like it has almost like a life of its own sort of thing. And we just follow his mental unraveling as things start to go weird, and it's very subtle, like only little details here and there, and then but it just felt unfinished. It's a really cool concept, like a really, really cool concept, and it could have actually been a full book if he just fleshed it out more, but it just wasn't. It was just like, it felt really unfinished, felt a little bit rushed, and it just sort of ends, and it ends like mid-sentence, which I think is supposed to be a sign that like he gets interrupted when he's in the middle of doing stuff, because the whole time you're like, is this happening? Is this house like, I don't know, like sentient, like alive? Is this happening, or is it just him? And you don't really get an answer, which is cool, and you don't need an answer. But so he gets like cut off mid-sentence, so you don't know. But the way it's done, like actually done, it just feels like the author literally like got like interrupted in the middle of writing his novel, and then just was like and published it, and it's just like, and it's just not very good. I gave it 2 stars. The only reason why I gave it 2 stars is for the concept, because it's such a cool concept. It could be done really well. Having a journal where things are going weird and his writing changes and stuff as things happen, and he looks back at his own like writing and like, wait, when I didn't write that, when was that written? That's cool. And like, because you're seeing everything through his like unreliable mind and eyes. That's really cool. It wasn't done well. You needed more, even like 100 more pages would have made a huge difference to this short story. But he didn't, and it was pretty shit. Next I read I, Tituba, Black Witch of Salem. This is my other 5-star read for the month. This was amazing. I like annotated it to death. It was so good. This is written by Maurice Condé, and it is a tribute to the first woman to be accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials. She's written as a black woman in this, but she's thought to be Native American. But it's debated what her actual sort of cultural history was. But in this tribute to the black women and other people of colour that were harmed and and put through the same sort of torture as white women and men during the Salem witch trials, this book pays tribute to that. So this book, you follow Tituba. She is born on a slave plantation in Barbados, and her mother is killed, so she ends up running away. She ends up being freed and just like cast out of her home, and she ends up being taken in by Mama Yaya, and she's a witch, but they don't call it witch because to them, like, they don't have any knowledge of witchcraft or what being a witch means. She's actually a healer and someone that has, like, I guess clairvoyance or contact with the dead, or is it mediumship? I don't know. She's can like conjure the dead and talk to spirits and things. So she ends up being like a more sensitive in, you know, the mystical way, and powerful woman. And we follow her as she ends up making huge mistakes that I do not agree with, and going to America and becoming almost voluntarily enslaved again, and the events that happen as she gets accused and of witchcraft and blah blah blah. And it's really, really, really good. So good. It is a French, like originally in French, and this is an English translation because I don't speak French, sadly. But it's just so good. I'm so much must be lost in translation. I can imagine that the original French is beautiful, because Maurice does have a lovely writing style even in the translation. But it's just so good, and Maurice like pays tribute to other like authors of other novels. Like there's a tribute to main character to The Kingdom of This World, called Tine Noel, which I might be saying wrong, and she also pays tribute to The Scarlet Letter and things with the character Hester in this, and it's just really, really cool how it intertwines other other novels. And I just really appreciate this book so much because it's good to hear like a perspective, even if it's fictional, of like a black perspective of the people that also suffered during all these famous events that, you know, we only really hear about the white side of it and not the black people, because, you know, they were slaves. And it was really entertaining, really, really good, beautifully written, completely 5 stars for sure, and definitely like a must read if you're interested in Salem witch trials. Like, even though the trials on the focal point, it's Tituba, her life, her experience, her mind is the focal point. It's just so interesting and so good. So finally in November I read another poetry collection, which was Burn by Ursa Daly Ward. It was the last book that I read in November, and this was 3 stars again. It's not because it's bad. This poetry collection is very honest, and you can tell that Ursa does put a lot of herself into her work. It just isn't my form of poetry. This just wasn't for me. Even though there were some things I like, which I did tab, it wasn't for me. A lot of the style felt very conversational and very how to say stream of consciousness, I guess, and that isn't really my style. I think I prefer more lyrical poetry, to be honest, and so I found like I couldn't connect so much with a lot of the poems. It did feel a bit too relaxed. I don't know, but it was good, and you can tell that she does put a lot of herself into her work, and some of it is very, very honest. And it's a lot of the poetry is about her relationships, her relationship to her mum and her parents, and her relationships with men and women, and it's just really, it's really interesting, but it just wasn't entirely for me. But yeah, so those were the books that I read in November. I don't think I've forgotten any. I keep checking my notebook. But I hope you enjoyed this video and hearing what I've read. I'm enjoying seeing what other people read in November as well. I hope you have happy reading times, and I'll see you around.